Hi, this is Dorie Clark. I am here with Tiffani Bova, and this is our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. I'm so excited to feature Tiffani. She is an evangelist on growth and innovation for Salesforce. She is, along with me, one of my Thinkers 50 homies on the Thinkers 50 list of top management thinkers, and she is the author of a new book, reasonably new at least, and it is called Growth IQ. Tiffani, it's fantastic to have you here.
Oh, Dorie, it's a pleasure. There's no place I'd rather be than, right here with you.
Amazing. Starting your West Coast morning right here with us. And welcome to everyone who is tuning in live and joining us. Please feel free to type into the chat box because we'd love to see who you are and where you're from. So let us know where you're tuning in from, and feel free to ask questions that you have for Tiffani into the chat box as well. We are going to be talking today on how to cultivate innovation and growth in your own business. So any burning questions you have about those topics, we would love to take them. So Tiffani, actually the first question that I have, so I run a community called the Recognized Expert Course and Community. And actually earlier this morning, I was literally just doing a webinar with folks from the community. And one of the questions that often comes up is that folks have a day job and they are interested in creating thought leadership on the side, but it's so hard to do. It's so hard to make time for this. You have a very demanding full-time job with Salesforce, and yet you're able to write a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, make it on the Thinkers 50 list. Can you talk a little bit about how you personally do that? Like, how do you carve out time for innovation and thought leadership amidst everything else that you're doing?
Dorie, that's a great question. And I often get the same question as well. So, I think everyone's struggling with how do they, do their job today and then maybe prepare for what are they going to do in the future. And this is sort of one of them. The one piece of advice I can say is, be committed to the process, whatever that process might be, and taking time out of every single day to learn something new or try something new. So when you're asked, how do you start putting out thought leadership? Start putting out thought leadership. And I don't want to say thought leadership as, what does that mean? I think thought leadership is when other people view what you're putting out as being challenging and unique and gets you to think differently about the things you're doing every day. And if you can start to really work out that muscle, over time, you'll get better and better and better, and you'll see and find your voice and then find what resonates with people, besides yourself. But the first step is you have to take the first step.
Yeah, amen to that, Tiffani. That's fantastic. So I just want to say hi to some of the folks who are tuning in and joining us live. We have Khalif and Mohammed. We have Anna from Vancouver, Rosinda from Mexico, Annabelle from Miami, Jeannie from Oregon, Todd from New York, Kamran from Pakistan, Katie's here from New York, and we have a friend from LinkedIn from Tulsa. So a very good assortment of people and many more. Welcome to everybody. So, a question that I have for you, Tiffani, I know that you, of course, deal with customer experience and innovation at the enterprise level, the business to business level. But something that I am hearing so often from people now a year into the pandemic is that folks are just feeling so burned out. Everybody's on Zoom 24/7. And I'm curious, when we think about the preconditions for being innovative or for being able to sort of summon those parts of ourselves where we're a little bit more of a creative thinker, or even being able to elevate ourselves enough to say, well, what would be a good innovation for my business, or how could I serve customers better? I think a lot of us feel like we're just really kind of in the doldrums about that. What is your advice for people about how we can actually tap into that mindset more effectively?
Well, I think small businesses actually have a much better shot at doing this than big enterprises, right? Because it's a big machine. You have to really look at the culture of the business. But again, like what I was saying a few minutes ago, should you carve out a half hour twice a day where you unplug, step away from your desk if you're still working from home, walk around the block, give yourself some fresh air, give yourself permission and time to think about things. I think if you're just running on the day, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, or, 9 to 9, from the burnout community that's working nonstop, ultimately, you're just not going to be fresh with ideas. And so, I used to get all of my thinking time on airplanes and when I was traveling. And I don't have that time anymore. So I have to try to recreate space in my day where I can go out there and think. So if you're a small business or an enterprise, maybe actually start creating a mandate where meetings are 25 minutes or 40 minutes, not 30 minutes and 60 minutes. Give time back. We actually do something at Salesforce where we have well-being Thursdays, and so no meeting Thursdays. And, once a month, a Friday is a well-being day. Don't take any calls, take the day off as a team, be supportive of giving people the break. So I think that it comes down to culture and commitment to make sure that health and well-being is front and center as you're asking so much more of people who are working, pretty much nonstop.
I think that's a really important point, Tiffani. Thank you for raising that. And I just want to say hi to some new folks tuning in. We have Bernhard from Munich. We have Minx from Oakland, Veronica from New Jersey. Debbie's here from SoCal. I love it. Quentin is from, Q is from Columbus here. This is wonderful. Diane is from Cleveland. We're so happy to have all of you guys tuning in, and feel free to put your questions for Tiffani into the chat box. I will also mention, if you want to make sure that you get lots of Tiffani's insights, feel free to check out her website at tiffanybova.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly sessions here, you can go to dorieclark.com, sign up for my newsletter, and you will get reminders about these great sessions. So Tiffani, a question that I have for you is, I know you have actually been pretty recently doing some deep research into the question of employee experience, and especially during the pandemic when people are stretched so thin. Oftentimes, for the past year, people have not been around their coworkers. It's a pretty disjointed experience that many people have been thrown into. What have you learned about employee experience? And if the folks listening to this are themselves team leaders or corporate leaders, how should they be thinking about treating their employees and actually creating the right kind of employee experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think employee experience meant something very differently in, prior to sort of this time last year. It might have been, what are the perks? Do you have foosball tables, and do you give free lunch? And, what are all the things that you can get on campus at your, offices or in your office space? And now employee experience is something totally different. How do you stay connected? How do you make sure people feel safe and welcome and connected to people that they work with on a day-to-day basis? So that has opened up an entirely different conversation around employee experience. And so I had this hypothesis, and, I think, Dorie, you'll appreciate this being such a great, amazing academic, is I was saying something that I believe that employee experience would drive better customer experience, that would drive greater growth for businesses. So I approached our prior CMO at Salesforce, Stephanie Buscemi, and I said, I have this hypothesis. I'd love to prove it out. So we went out and did primary research, and sure enough, companies that had better and stronger employee experience had better and stronger customer experience and had a 1.8x growth rate than like companies. And for $1 billion brand, it's like $40 million. For a small business, it can be super significant. It also has impact on employee retention, hiring the right talent and attracting the right talent, investing in your people. All of those things play a part. And of course, I work for a very large technology company. Technology is a huge part of this, especially today, that if you force your employees to have to log into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different applications to serve a customer, that's not a great employee experience. And what ends up happening, unintended consequences, your customer doesn't have a great experience. And so then it impacts, maybe that customer won't come back and buy again. They won't refer you. It is absolutely this flywheel effect. So I say that the fastest way to get customers to love your brand is to get employees to love their job. And if you can do those two things, the sky's the limit. And I think small businesses are absolutely well positioned to nail this, because they have the ability to not have so much complication and complexity in the business to really focus on those two things.
I think that's so interesting, Tiffani. Thank you for sharing that. And it's quite powerful, right? The fastest way to get customers to love your business is to get employees to love their job.
Yes.
Just knowing that if we're focusing on the small number of right things that we can really be driving a powerful outcome. So I love that. Thank you for that question. And one came in from Seema that I think is great. She was just captivated by some of the remarks that you were making earlier about ways in the midst of the pandemic to stay creative, to continue creating thought leadership, and performing at our best. She wants to know if you have a tip. What is one consistent action you take? So we can start with Tiffani Bova, but also we can say that one can take. Feel free to answer it the same or different in order to stay calm in the midst of all this mishigas.
So it's a great question, and I just tweeted something this morning actually because I don't know if any of you have seen this commercial where from Calm, the company Calm, or take 30 seconds. And just, that's the commercial, like take 30 seconds and Calm logos in the bottom. And it's this really soothing music. And I was like, I just literally stood there as a walking by listening to the news, and I stopped, I closed my eyes, and I took the 30 seconds. And, the first time you do it, you're like at 10 seconds, you're like, okay, I'm done. And you're like, oh, it's not 30 seconds yet. You don't even realize how hard it is to just stay still and calm for 30 seconds. But taking those breaks throughout the day, I actually block time on my calendar, a half hour in the morning, a half hour in the afternoon. If I'm, back to back all day, where I'll actually get up, and I'm still working from home, obviously, and I'll walk around the block, and I'll just listen to music, or I'll listen to nothing. I won't listen to podcasts or anything. I just want my mind to get a break. And that half hour or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you have to take ownership of giving yourself that time to find your calm. And if you don't do that, right, you're just not giving yourself a moment to recharge. Look, you're not going to show up as your best self, firing on all cylinders, if you're just spent and tired and, frazzled and overwhelmed. And those are not great words to use when you wake up every day. It's not what keeps you up at night. It's what gets you up in the morning. Like, be inspired to get up and tackle the day and be your best self. And if you don't do that and take those breaks, you're just going to burn out. And right now, that's a big concern for so many businesses, is making sure the people and their people are okay.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffani. I think that's really helpful. And I see Seema is writing in here to say that she uses Calm and she's a fan. So great tips there. Now, I'm curious. Obviously, you work for one of the major tech companies in Silicon Valley, Salesforce. I would love to hear your thoughts about how technology itself actually plays in to innovation and customer experience. What are the ways that we ought to be thinking about this? And if someone here is either themselves an entrepreneur or a small business owner, or maybe they work inside a company, but they have the ability to be able to advocate a little bit for a new tool or a new way of thinking about things, what should we be keeping in mind in terms of technology as a positive force for growth and innovation?
So I'm going to go on a little bit of a career journey, because I think the answer to this has some relevance. Is I have sold technology. I did in my career early on, being a quota-bearing sales rep, and then running sales organizations, then sales marketing, and then customer service, really getting this understanding of the impact in which technology can have on small, medium, and very large global businesses. And the art of the possible in using technology to help businesses not only grow, but make their people more productive. And I don't mean like on the hamster wheel productive. I mean, if it takes an hour to do something, could we do it in 10 minutes to give them back 50 minutes to do something else that might be more impactful? And so, because I saw it from a firsthand account of seeing how technology could transform industries, and I'm going to date myself here, but I was selling this in 1996, 97, 98, 99. I worked for the largest web hosting company in the US from 2000 to 2004. I
thought you were going back to fax machines,
I have sold and taken orders on fax machines. That's how, right? And
I like it.
And I have spun a Rolodex, which is actually this thing that sits on your desk that holds business cards. Like, that's what a Rolodex is. And I spun it, and wherever it stopped, that's who I called. Like, that was my early CRM system, right? So I bought my first domain name in 1995. Like, I've been kind of on this journey for a minute. But then I had the opportunity, after my sort of selling and leadership sort of as a practitioner, to be an advisor for a decade. And when I did that, I really saw how people struggled to cross that chasm of using technology and not using technology, right? That they were either afraid of it, they thought it was going to be too expensive, too complex, that it was going to displace work. And early on, there were a lot of those concerns. And now as technology has gotten less expensive and more democratized and there's more choices, you really find that businesses have an opportunity to leverage this technology in new ways. And so I'd say this: if you're not using technology today, ask your employees how they actually do their job day to day. If you're not using technology today, talk to your customers and ask them, what do they want from you in the future? I think you're going to find that there's going to be gaps between what you think is happening and the reality of what's happening. And then how can you use technology to shore that up? Once again, improve employee experience, improve customer experience. So for me, technology is just a means to an end. The big shift happens in culture, people, and process. That's where technology gets used. Technology for technology's sake is not going to do anything if you don't change the people and process. It's just a very expensive shelfware, as we like to say in the industry. So you have to be open to understand how, where, and why you would use it. What's the best solution? And small businesses now have an absolute opportunity to capitalize and be much more agile than larger companies in using technology in new ways.
Yeah, so interesting, Tiffany. Thank you for that. And I'm curious. So, your most recent book, it's called Growth IQ. And for people who may not be familiar with it or haven't had a chance to read it yet, can you give us a sense? What does Growth IQ actually mean? We know about regular IQ. Nowadays, we know about EQ. What is Growth IQ, and what are the most important things that regular professionals need to know about this?
Yeah, when I took that sort of decade of advising companies, I used to hear a very common thread. Boy, we're having trouble growing the business, and it could be top line revenue. And I would always hear these three things: spend more marketing money, hire more salespeople, cut costs. It was sort of, those were the three levers that businesses would pull. And I said, it can't just be those three, right? There has to be other ways. And so I wanted to use IQ as, you don't need to outspend. You don't need to out R&D. You don't need to out innovate. You need to outthink your competition. And that thinking may be hire new salespeople, enter new markets, invest in new product development, expand into new verticals. And so really approaching it with a beginner's mind, giving yourself some space to hear and listen of what you could be doing differently, and not getting trapped in that, we tried it, it didn't work, our competition doesn't do it, our culture won't let us do it, which is all the stuff, Dorie, I know you talk about all the time. It's like getting out of your own way in order to really grow the business. And ultimately, I believe that you can outthink your competition. Now, all those other things have to happen. You have to spend money, you have to hire people, you have to do R&D and innovation, but doing it at the right time, doing it in the right combination, and doing it for what's right for your business in the context of the market, not just going out and replicating what your competition does. So I sort of boiled it down to 10 paths to growth. And so far, people really seem to resonate with what it had to say. So it's been really a pleasure to watch how the book has just taken off.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations on that, Tiffany. And I see we have a great comment from Jenny. She says, you have to embrace tech and open source. Sharing information is in advance, and it's not about holding on to it. It's not like Coke's secret formula. That's right. Absolutely. We got to keep moving forward. And to that end, we have a LinkedIn user who's curious, Tiffany, what is your recommended reading list? And then they send another message specifically around keeping up with technology trends. Have you read interesting books lately that you would recommend, or potentially just classics in the field that everyone should be aware of? What would you recommend if someone wants to amp up their knowledge in this world?
So great question. When I was writing my book, I actually read 75 of the best business books ever written. Like, that was my sort of homework assignment.
Wow.
And what I did with that was I literally said, what did I like about the book? What didn't I like about the book? What was missing? Like the tone and the feel. And so I sort of, reread so many of the ones that I had read historically, In Search of Excellence, Blue Ocean Strategy, Crossing the Chasm, Good to Great, like, those sort of classics, Innovator's Dilemma. And those are all really good. So my first bit of advice would be, look down the Thinker's 50 list and start reading those books because they're really good. Dorie's obviously included in that list. But what I'd say on the technology book list, problem with that is by the time, if you know anything about publishing, by the time that book publishes, that technology is almost 18 months old, or that story or that hot thing, unless you're going to self-publish. So if you can find some, real-time self-published books that are out on what's happening, it could be around Bitcoin, it could be around what's happening, from an employee experience, or now, using blockchain to use art and all the things that's happening there. There's so much happening so quickly that to keep up, I think podcasts, I think newsletters, I think social media, I think, YouTube, watching what people are putting out in real time may be better for that technology sort of, what's hot and what's not in the moment. But if you're looking for that sort of long-term view, look, I think the purpose of my book when I wrote it was just to stimulate new thought, right? Just to get you to reconsider what had been, how you'd approached it in the past. And that's how you have to really look at reading and consuming books, is what will it stimulate you to do differently than you did prior to reading it, or listening to that podcast, or listening to something like this, Better with Dorie Clark. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to make time to consume, be a student of your profession, and whatever your medium is in order to get it is what's important. But I'd say from a technology standpoint, that's really hard to get a book out on something that's hot at the moment, fast enough for people to consume it and do something with it.
Yeah, really good point, Tiffani. And I will just add in a couple of suggestions of my own of things that I've personally enjoyed. There are several books that have been done by a couple of thinkers out of MIT, Andrew McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson. They write about future technology trends, and I think do a great job. Also, a couple of weeks ago on this very show on Better, I interviewed a gentleman named Stephen Kotler, who has a new book out called The Art of Impossible. He has previously written a couple of books with Peter Diamandis, who's the founder of Singularity University, Bold and Abundance. I think there's even a few more that they've done together. And those are also very interesting, kind of longer term, more speculative looks at future technology trends, but I think are pretty interesting. So yeah, great question.
And you just had Martin Lindstrom on, right? So where has common sense gone? That's a great book too. Like what has happened to common sense? Has it left planet Earth? Which I thought it's just such a great read. And the long-term technology books, Dorie, as you said, are really, really important. If you're a technologist, those are the kinds of books you should be reading. If you're someone in business who's looking to solve current problems, that's what I meant by you got to find a way to frame it today, because those long view looks are going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and they may never come to fruition.
Yeah, such a good point, Tiffani. And just a reminder, if you are enjoying this conversation, you can learn more about Tiffani Bova and her work at her website, which is stunningly called TiffaniBova.com. You can find her there. And if you're interested in making sure you never miss one of our weekly sessions, go to DorieClark.com and you can sign up for my email list, get a free self-assessment, and you will be regularly reminded about these great weekly conversations. And if you're enjoying it, please hit the like button and the share button, so your colleagues on LinkedIn or your social platform of choice can also benefit from the insights here. So great stuff here. Type your questions into the chat box. We have a few more minutes left with the wonderful Tiffani Bova. And Tiffani, a question that I have, you were mentioning earlier that that it actually may be easier right now for small businesses as compared to larger businesses to stay close to their customer, to prioritize customer experience, employee experience, and consequently to enjoy the fruits of that innovation and growth. I am curious, over the past year during the arc of the pandemic, whether this is, Fortune 500 company or a little tiny small business, are there examples that you have noticed that you feel like are particularly apt or particularly interesting or illustrative for us of a company of any size that has successfully harnessed the principles of growth and innovation that you advocate?
Oh gosh, there's just been so many. I'll tell you that it's been devastating and inspiring at the same time over the last year. Devastating on so many levels, but inspiring as well. Inspiring because the resiliency in small businesses to keep their doors open, virtually, keep people employed, continue to serve their customers, continue to add value to their communities and provide for their families, like all of those things. Very quickly overnight, things that many small businesses might have resisted over time, like what we were talking about a few minutes ago when it comes to technology, that they weren't doing because they felt it was too much for them. They didn't need it. They had a small community business. Everybody, it was referrals and everyone kept coming back. And then they realized overnight, boom, the doors were closed. And, oh, I don't actually know my customers' names and their contact information. I'm not able to actually let them know that we're doing delivery for our restaurants. My menu isn't even online. I don't even have, all of those things that weren't done. Very quickly, so many people, hey, Kat, so many people were just like up for the challenge. Like, what can I quickly do to make sure that my people can continue to work, serve my customers, and do all the things that I was doing. So it could be something as small as literally putting up a website, selling what you sell online, putting up your menu, making a partnership with a delivery service. Whatever it might be, it was all of a sudden, all those investments that hadn't been made over the last 5, 7, 10 years came rushing through, right? This Black Swan event was this catalyst for this huge digital renaissance that we had been talking about for so long, but yet so many didn't understand the value until it was kind of forced upon them. So it could be call centers. Now it's using chatbots. Now it's using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be hyper responsive because the call centers were not full of employees anymore. How do you get commerce and, allow people to buy from you? So it could be a small, makeup company. It could be a textile company, a clothing line. You've seen lots of small businesses really, really grow. Now, there are certain categories, unfortunately, in industries and verticals that were hit much harder. Hospitality, travel, those are not areas where even technology could potentially help. But some were really innovative. Museums said, we're going to virtually give you tours. Operas did, virtual operas and virtual concerts and brought people together, whatever they could do to not only maintain relevancy, but also make sure their employees stay engaged and stay connected and stay collaborative. So it, like I said, it's been devastating and inspiring at the same time. And I'm just looking forward to, some sense of what the next future is going to look like, because I'm not a fan of the new normal, because I don't think we should aspire to go back to the way that it was. I think we need to aspire to learn all the things we've learned over the last year from a social justice standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a healthcare standpoint, everything, and really go to that future. And the last thing I'm going to say on this, because I think it's really impactful, is, we've looked at pushing people to work from anywhere, yet not everybody, I'm just going to speak specifically in the US, has access to high-speed internet. And so when you say you have to work from home or educate from home, there's 25 or 30 million people in the US that just don't have access to it. And so how do we help? That's really the good side of technology and the positive use cases of how do we help everybody have access. And on a global basis, in emerging markets, it's worse. So we have to make sure that we bring everybody along on this journey with us if we're going to become a more digitally enabled and engaged society.
Such an important point, Tiffani. That's right on. And in fact, in my book, Reinventing You, one of the themes that I talk about is the difference between what I call lowercase r reinvention and capital R reinvention. And the capital R is these dramatic moments when sometimes we're kind of forced into something, much like the pandemic did for so many of us. Whereas lowercase r reinvention is about the small ways that we can proactively keep ourselves fresh and keep ourselves ready so that if a disruption happens, we're able to glide into it much more smoothly rather than having it be so disruptive. So I think that's really powerful. We have time for probably just one more question for you, Tiffani. And along those lines, so much of the work that you do around innovation and growth, and of course in your book, Growth IQ, it's at a fundamental level talking about the fact that we need to be adaptable, whether it's a company being adaptable or an individual being adaptable. If we get too locked in, there's no room for innovation. There's no room to do things differently. And that is how we end up sometimes in some bad situations. So I am curious, for all the folks that are tuning in and listening here, what is your best advice about how we, both as individuals and at the enterprise level, can stay nimble so that we are ready to embrace change and innovation?
Great question, Dorie. I'm gonna start from the leadership and work my way down. Leaders have to be sort of transparent, and they have to communicate that people have permission to try stuff that's going to fail, and not sort of penalize them for that kind of innovative thinking, little r's, right? To use your term, right? The reinvention at a small level, like giving people permission to actually think, take those times, have conversations with employees, have conversations with customers, come back with ideas, test them. I don't believe in sort of, there's win and lose. It's sort of win and learn. And so learning through those motions requires the culture of the company to give a safe place for people to try and learn. So if it's not that, it's really hard at the individual contributor level to just sort of show up and be like, I'm going to try new things, because you may be breaking, a system and not understanding where those implications or unintended consequences may be. So leadership has to create a culture that is much more open. If you are a middle manager, you now have to focus on giving that permission at the team level, but making sure that it's not this overwhelmingly frequency of the extroverts that are more communicative and are willing to talk about things. You're going to have to find a way to pull everybody into the conversation. And so an introvert or someone who processes differently may not want to share on a forum or a team call. So as a manager, you've got to do that on the one-on-one. Hey, what are you thinking about? Are you taking that time to think about new things? Why don't you bring me one suggestion, next time we talk, of something you think we do here that's really stupid? Like, just ask them a question, and they may be like, I'm afraid to come back and tell my manager I think this is really stupid. But if they do, and you then go, you know what, that is kind of stupid, let's fix it, you've now given them the confidence to try it again. Now to the individual contributor. This is where you have to make all those investments that we were talking about. And if you find yourself really getting motivated by this innovation and thinking differently and coming up with new ideas and trying to solve big problems and jobs to be done, those kinds of things, and you're not getting satisfied or you're not getting supported in where you are, then you have to maybe make different decisions. But if you are getting supported, all the better. Be inspired once again. If your employees are happy, your customers are happy, those two things, right? Employees loving their job, they feel that it's safe, they feel they can try things and they're not going to be penalized. Of course, if it's not illegal or if it's not going to hurt somebody, go for it, right? But, those would be sort of the three tiers of how I'd answer that, because if leadership does one thing and nobody else is doing it, it doesn't work. If everybody at the individual contributor is doing it and leadership doesn't acknowledge it or appreciate it, it doesn't work. Everybody has to be on and in this together.
Amen to that. Tiffani Bova, so great to have the opportunity to speak with you. For those of you who are tuning in, thank you so much. Again, feel free to hit the like button and the share button so that your friends and colleagues can enjoy this conversation. To learn more about Tiffani, of course, go to tiffanibova.com to learn more about my work, and make sure you tune in regularly. Go to dorieclark.com. Next week, we have Francesca Gino joining us. She is a Harvard Business School professor, author of the book Rebel Talent. It is every Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, 5 o'clock in London. Tiffani Bova, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Dorie. It's a pleasure. Thanks for all the really great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tiffani, and thank you, everyone. Take care.